There's a couple more. Okay, lovely. I think we'll get started. So, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today in My Career in TV with Emily Ringe. So my name's Gavin and I work for the NICO project based at Norwich University of the Arts. The NICO and Take a Place project works with universities across East Anglia. And in my role, I support students from Year 9 upwards who are studying creative subjects. My colleague Annabelle is also here today, and she'll be online throughout the session and just to help us make sure everything runs as smoothly as possible. I'll be handing the reins over to Emily in a few short moments, but I just want to go through some house rules before we get started. So it would be great if everybody can make sure that their microphones and the microphones and the videos are muted for the whole session. Emily will be presenting for about 30 minutes. And after that, we'll be looking to do a bit of a Q&A with her. So if you have any questions for Emily, make sure to submit them into the chat function, which you'll find at the lower toolbar. And we'll answer as many questions as we can until we wrap up around 5:45. If we have any technical issues or if Emily's or myself's internet connection drops out, we'll try to reconnect for around 5 minutes. And if that doesn't happen, we'll unfortunately cancel the session. Our apologies in advance if that happens, but the whole session will be recorded. So don't worry, we'll be able to send that out to everybody if that issue arises. Lastly, if you see or hear anything inappropriate, or if you have any questions or concerns about a session or any situations at home, please don't hesitate to message myself privately or Annabelle privately, as we'll be on hand to help and assist you. So that's it for me. I'll hand over to Emily and we'll get started.
Cool. Hi, everyone. So I'm Emily. I studied film and moving image at Norwich University Arts, and now I work as a TV assistant producer. So today I'm going to be talking about my journey so far into the world of television, starting from school and going through till today. During school, I excelled in creative subjects. So at both GCSE and A level, I took art, photography, and English literature. I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a job at that stage, but knew that I did want to get good grades so that I could go into university. But it wasn't until I started my A level in photography that I realised I might be suited to a career in media. So here are some examples of the kind of work that I had produced in photography. The image on the right was a movement study with a friend of mine who was a dancer, and the one on the left is actually inspired by one of my favourite films, which is Road to Perdition. My photography teacher gave us the freedom to create our own brief for one unit of work, so that's when I chose to do a whole project on cinematography. So cinematography is the art and photography and of camera work and filmmaking. So a cinematographer is basically in charge of how all the shots look in the film and in charge of making everything really beautiful. So I'd always really loved film, so thought it was a great way to combine the two areas. So I had big influences like Roger Deakins, Conrad Hall, Gregory Crewdson, who are all cinematographers and photographers who just do amazing work. So these images are some from a film noir inspired series that I created within that cinematography project. In photography, they encourage you to shoot in as much black and white as possible so that you learn about lighting rather than just colour. So film noir is a style of film from the 40s and 50s that was popular in America. They're normally crime thrillers, and the style is always very moody, lots of dark shadows and silhouettes, like as you can see here. Again, because I was combining both film and photography, the style of film noir lent itself to the project and enabled me to learn more about filmmaking.
So from there, how did you transition from art and photography backgrounds in your A levels to a more film focused and very practical degree?
So it was actually when my photography teacher asked me to help teach some of her media students about camera work that I thought about going to study film myself. I researched a lot of creative and art focused universities, found Norwich, totally fell in love with how the course was all based around practical filmmaking rather than theory. So I applied, I got accepted for an interview straight away. So for the interview, I basically gathered a portfolio which showed off all of my best film inspired photographs. But I also did create a short film based on my film noir photographs, which is terrible and I will never show anyone else. um, but it was just to show that I was capable of creating a narrative film. After all, I knew that a lot of people would have media studies behind them, which I didn't have at the time, and I just wanted to make sure that I stood a chance. So I got accepted to anyway based on the interview and was thrilled to be starting in 2013. It is a big jump from school to university, especially when you go to study something that you haven't before. But I quickly made friends and gained a network of people who I really enjoyed working with. So in year one, we made all sorts of narrative films and got used to the basics of filmmaking. We'd do group projects as well as solo projects where we learned everything about pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production is do before you film your film. So it's all the script writing and storyboarding. So basically, all the things that will help you to make your short film efficiently. Production is obviously the making of. So as groups, we'd go to different locations and get to shoot different things, which was great because on occasion you'd have to get access to a hotel or like a public building, which is something that you'll definitely need to do when you start working. So post production is editing your film. So we learned different editing software and learned about sound design, even got to produce Foley, which is basically all the sound effects you make in a studio after you've filmed. So, for example, you'd always need to record extra footsteps because that kind of thing just wouldn't be picked up during the filming. Um, in year two, we did all this kind of stuff again, but we got to work on different kinds of projects. So instead of narrative storytelling, we got to make a documentary and an advert, which definitely opened my eyes to different methods of storytelling. So in third year, though, this was when everything got a bit more real. The year was spent writing a dissertation and making our own 7-minute short films. So the dissertation was the first term, and enabled us to develop our research skills, which is obviously something very useful for your career. So I ended up writing a 10,000 word essay on Silence of the Lambs and actually enjoyed every part of writing about it. Uh, Basically because we got so much support from our tutors and the university had great resources, it was never as scary as it sounded. Um, so these images on screen at the moment show my pre-visualization, which is basically a photographic storyboard. So you've got the storyboard versus how it looked and in the edit basically. And as you can see, I stuck to it very closely. But doing this kind of pre-production is really key to keeping it how you want it, especially if you've got a big vision for it. These are like some behind the scenes. We had a really great time making all of our short films as a team. We had 6 members, so we made 6 films in 6 weeks, which was very intense, but we were also used to working with each other that it was just so much fun. I also was lucky enough to do all the camera work, all the cinematography for all of the people in my team, which was a lot of fun. But it also meant that I got to film all sorts, like a documentary and a period drama, which I never thought I'd do. Because I'd continued to develop my skills over the 3 years at uni, all of my friends and colleagues knew that I had a good eye and they trusted me with their work, which was really, really great. So this was us all on graduation day after a very successful third year. I ended up with a first, which is the highest grade that you can get. And I also received the Vice Chancellor's commendation for my short film, which is amazing. The film course at NUA is amazing because everything is practical and you're just learning to network from day one, which is key if you want to work in film or TV. It gave me a load of skills as well as the confidence going forward into the world of work. So after filming 6 short films, I also had enough work to put together a showreel of all my camera work. So, a show reel is the film equivalent of a portfolio. It highlights your best work and gives employers or fellow creatives an insight into what you can do. So, on the next slide, there is an extract from mine. It's a little bit of it, it's not the whole of it, but it will give you an idea of the kind of thing you would put together after finishing uni. So yeah, that's just like a little extract from it. It's normally about a minute and a half, depending on how much you have.
A really lovely show reel you got there. And obviously, coming out of university, you mentioned you got the Vice Chancellor's commendation, you've got the show reel there. But was that enough to get you work in the industry? Was it easy to find work in the industry after all of that and all the experience of university?
Yeah, so apologies. So it definitely gave me a lot of confidence like moving forward and in myself, and it did lead to a lot of great opportunities. So in the summer, for example, after university, I went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and practiced networking in a real world sense. I watched the play, and then whilst chatting to some of the performers afterwards, I found out that they were looking for someone to photograph their plays. I told them what I'd been doing at university and then just volunteered, and they took me on. So this was probably the first time that I'd been paid to do something creative, which was a massive win after obviously studying something creative at uni for 3 years. So the image on the left, as you can see, is something that I took from one of their plays and was just, again, something that I got to add to my portfolio, which was great. In the autumn, NUA had arranged for the best films from our course to be shown at Aesthetica Short Film Festival, which again was a great opportunity. I was asked to do an interview for their website and had my film screened in a real cinema, through professionals, and get to know people, which was great. My course leader then got in touch with me shortly after this and put me in touch with another ex-student who had ended up working at Idris Elba's film company, Green Door Pictures. They make all sorts from like films to television dramas to documentaries. So I was obviously very excited to get my foot in the door. So I worked with them for a month as work experience and learned all about development. So development is where basically all the ideas are thought up and then pitched to companies like the BBC, Sky, Netflix. It was really interesting, and it definitely put everything we'd learned about pre-production into real world practice, because I was seeing how these ideas that I'd seen on TV were actually coming to fruition in the beginning, which was great. So now I had some solid work experience that was on my CV, and everything was looking a lot better. So I was actually starting to get more responses from jobs, which was great.
And out of all of those responses, what was the first job experience that you had after that work experience?
So my first job in TV was with a company called STV, who are a they're an ITV company. The S stands for Scotland. I got my first job with them as an office runner after 2 interviews. As a runner, you do absolutely everything from making coffees to reading actual scripts that are going out for dramas. STV make entertainment, factual, and drama productions, so I did get to work on a range of projects. I was mainly supporting the development team, which I was used to from my work experience, which, obviously it's all the people making and creating new ideas, but this time it was for a wider range of things. So I went on every production that was going on. I worked on ITV game shows like Catchphrase, as well as documentaries for BBC4. But then while I was in the office and not on production, I was helping like the entertainment department with run throughs for new game shows, which is a development thing where you basically play out the game show in front of some high up people from the BBC, Channel 4, whoever you're pitching to try and get them to make it. So I'd have to play and be a contestant on several occasions, which always makes me realise how little general knowledge I actually have. But I also helped the factual department with research tasks as they would regularly include me in idea brainstorms. So it was great to have my voice heard in that sense straight away. Um, but yeah, I was constantly just learning and networking on this job, and I stayed with them for a year until I decided to go freelance with all my newfound contacts and skills. So in TV, the majority of people are freelance and go from show to show, which means that it's always very varied. You'll never have 2 days the same. So these are some of the shows that I worked on during my first year as a freelancer. I was still a runner when I started being freelance, but because you work on a single show, it's a quite an intense experience, and it makes you ready to step up to the next step. Um, so in television, you normally go down one of two routes. It's editorial or production. And production is the logistical side, which involves all the organising of a shoot. So you'd normally go down this route if you want to be a production manager or someone who just loves to organise everything. You want to be in charge of how the show runs and works. Editorial is the more creative route. So you take this route if you want to be involved with the content of the show. So this will be all the idea development and research, and is the path that I chose to follow. So after my last runner job, I stepped up to a researcher. So again, as a researcher, you do all sorts. So like all these shows that are here, it's very varied. So at one stage or another, I've worked as a games, a VT, a studio, and a location researcher. A studio researcher would be someone who would work on a studio show like Catchphrase or like a chat show. You'd be casting people, like casting contributors to come and play the game show, or you would be writing biographies and interview questions for people that were going to appear on a chat show. So that's always quite fun. As a location researcher, you're normally, finding and like sourcing locations to film at. So like what I said with uni, when that was a great time to get access to places, this was coming into real world. You'd be calling up locations, asking to film there, trying to do it for cheap a lot of the time. So you need to kind of step up your negotiation skills pretty quickly. But then games and VT are a bit more interesting, I say, because I've worked in them a lot. So my first role as a games researcher was on a show called Celebability. It was a big games task show, very silly. If you've seen anything like Celebrity Juice, it's kind of along those lines. But as a games researcher, you basically come up with ideas for games, you test them out, and then if they're good or silly enough, then you pitch them to your boss to be on the show. So here is me actually doing a games test for a go-kart for a Mario Kart style challenge that we were aiming to do that series.
Yeah, do one up here, there's loads of space up there. It goes.
So as you can see, I'm a very good games tester / driver. So yeah, after I worked on Celebability, I actually went to work in Liverpool for a month, which was great. Again, TV takes you all over. You could be working in London a lot, you could be working in Scotland, all over Great Britain, but you could always be taken abroad as well. Not at the moment, but that's definitely one of the perks of working in TV. So yeah, I worked in Liverpool for a month on a show called Refreshers Week for MTV. It was a game show, but it also had a reality spin to it, so it was a bit more like your Geordie Shore or The Only Way is Essex. So in these images, I'm standing with some of the giant props that we had to source, like short notice, so that's something you'd end up doing. I'm testing out fancy dress for one of the fancy dress competitions that we were doing. And then the last images of me and my colleagues just before we were going to do a games test for a water assault course that our contestants would then have to complete themselves. So the next clip is actually of me during a slightly embarrassing games test moment. that could have gone better.
One, go!
So yeah, my face hurt for a whole week after that show.
One.
So after Liverpool, I worked on a program called You versus Chris and Kem for ITV2, where again the idea was to develop ideas for tasks and then test them out. But this time, my boss really liked my idea of horseboarding, which was a big extreme sport that I'd found that I thought would work for the show, where basically you're dragged around by a horse whilst you're on a mountain board. But they obviously asked me to test it, and this is one of the only photos of me standing upright for the entire time. But you know, it made the show, and it went on to be a massive talking point for me in my interviews. Like I actually got to say, I pitched the idea, I sourced the location, I found the people to show us how to horseboard, and you know, I definitely got hired on a few occasions because of that. So always pitch your ideas. No idea is a bad idea, no matter how ridiculous it sounds at the time, I promise. So this was my last show as a games researcher, and it was definitely a learning curve. It was my toughest show to date, but it definitely taught me the most. I think sometimes you work on a show as a freelancer, and the 3 months you spend on it feels about 3 years long. More often than not, it's just because the team is too small to maybe deal with the workload. But you know, some of these jobs will come along and they might shake your confidence a bit, but ultimately it's not for long, and you always go on to something better. And during this job, I did get to play a game against an Olympian, Rebecca Adlington, which was a kind of tug of war in the water. So here you get to see her absolutely dragging me away.
2, 1, go!
So yeah, there are definitely not a lot of other jobs where you get to say you did that kind of stuff. So that's a perk of TV for sure.
I'm trying to stop myself from laughing before asking another question. It's such a good clip. Um, all of these kind of game researcher roles that you've been talking about, they seem really short, only about what, a month, 3 month long contracts. Was there ever a desire to do a longer term project, maybe something else like 6 months, a year long, even?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely. And I think as you get older, the freelance world starts to appeal a bit less because you want stability. But yeah, I was lucky enough actually to get. Apologies. I was lucky enough to get a job on Amazon's Back of the Net for 6 months. The reason why this job was 6 months was because it followed the Premier League at the time that was still obviously running properly, which was really, really great. And you know, it was a great show to work on. But so yeah, so a VT researcher is basically VT is an old abbreviation, and it stands for videotape, which like back in the day related to, you know, the videos that would be played into a studio show. So like a pre-recorded interview with a celebrity or a sketch or something like that. But so it's still the same kind of thing. You're making those kind of pre-recorded interviews, but that's where the VT comes from. So yeah, because Back of the Net was a show about the Premier League, I would be spending my time researching footballers who our host Peter Crouch would then go and interview. I'd be writing biographies for them, like finding out fun anecdotes for Peter to bring up. I'd also then write the questions for the interview, and then me and my director would be going around the country and like interviewing all these famous footballers, which was amazing. So we interviewed some really famous people, you know, that my dad was happy that I was meeting. So like Alan Shearer, David Ginola, but also some current players like James Milner from the Liverpool squad. So when I was on set, when we'd get to prep the interview, I'd be helping the camera person setting up the lights and the cameras. And then I'd be helping the talent and kind of escorting them in and getting them all comfortable. And then whilst the interview was going on, I'd be taking notes for the edit and things that were really funny that I thought, okay, well, we'll revisit that later, all that kind of stuff. Which meant that I'd also get to assist in the edit, so in the post-production, and actually get to choose bits that would go into the show, which was a new responsibility and was really, really fun. It definitely, working on Back of the Net was like taking me out of my comfort zone because, I was in no way a football fan before I worked on it, but actually seeing the ins and outs was great. And again, it's something that TV definitely has going for it. You work on so much, you learn so much, and you discover all these worlds that you would never even thought that you would have liked beforehand. So it was really, really great. Although, because I'd always have a lot of free time when the actual studio show was going on, because I'd already gone and filmed my part, I would get roped into doing quite a lot of very silly stuff. This video doesn't have sound, so I'll just try and explain what is going on throughout. So yeah, this is our host. So that's Peter Schmeichel, a very famous ex-footballer, and that is me walking terrified behind him, trying to model the best I could a Manchester United kit. Also trying not to laugh, but trying not to cry at how embarrassing the whole situation was. But yeah, sometimes productions don't have enough money to pay for an extra or a model, and you kind of just have to volunteer. It's all about kind of taking one for the team, and it's a perk of working in television. Sometimes you actually get to be on TV, and that's sometimes the only way that people are going to believe that you work in TV. So it was good fun.
So did working on a higher profile project like this with Amazon and working on a much longer project scale, did that help you progress into further roles of a similar nature?
Yeah, so I definitely think because it gave me a kind of topical show, which, it was a weekly, that's what I mean by topical, that it led on to bigger things and made my CV really varied. So, yeah, I was lucky enough after lockdown, I got my dream job to work on Mock the Week as their studio researcher, which was just amazing because it's something that I had watched growing up and that my parents watched, and everyone knew what it was, which was really great. And it was great that they gave me the opportunity to work on it. So initially I had to complete a task, just to show my understanding of the news and of the show itself. You have to do this a lot with kind of these well-established shows, definitely. They just expect a little bit more sometimes. But after I completed this, they invited me to an interview. So I did a couple of interviews with different members of the team, and then they offered me the job, and I was more than happy to take it after a few months of lockdown, that's for sure. So my role included kind of having my head stuck in the news 24 hours a day, so that I could basically pitch the funnier stories. So, it'd be things like duck found in, I have no examples off the top of my head, but they're really ridiculous stories that kind of the comedians could then make funny. So they were real world things, and it was actually really fun to do. And the team are just a great laugh. A lot of them are comedians, so you're constantly laughing. And luckily, I've been asked back for the next series. So again, in television, if you maintain the good relationships with people and you're good at your job, obviously, employers will always be loyal to you and they will help you to stay employed, because it's obviously freelance is hard and people like to be stable and know that they can count on people. So that's a good part of it.
So it seems like a really relatively short amount of time now. You've worked through real short-term projects, the bigger projects. Like you've said yourself that this was a bit of a dream project to work on. So where do you progress to next? What's next for you?
So I'm lucky enough to have stepped up actually recently. So after Mock the Week, I've stepped up to an assistant producer, which is the next level up from researcher in the editorial field. You do a lot of the similar stuff to a senior researcher. So again, like writing questions, lots of research, getting access to locations, all that kind of stuff, but you do have a bit more responsibility. So you might be involved in a few more meetings with like higher people, and just, you might be trusted to make some more important calls and things like that. So It's, it's really good. And yeah, at the moment I'm working for this a Welsh company called Boom. They make a lot of kind of factual entertainment stuff for the One Show and things like that. I'm working there because of COVID, really, because ordinarily I wouldn't obviously be working in Wales because I'm based in Hertfordshire. I'm normally in London, but that has been one kind of shining light about the lockdown and everything, is that you can work remotely, you can be involved with these different projects. So that's really great. And yeah, I'm working with someone I know, again, because I networked and I kept in contact with them since I was a runner. And they've given me this assistant producer gig because they really liked me when I was a runner. So that's how people remember you, if you're good and if you're friendly. Um, so yeah, so now I'm part of the team basically developing the ideas. So I'm working in the development team. So we work on things, working up glossy game show ideas to documentaries. And I can't really tell you much because I've signed a privacy waiver, as you do in development, because obviously you don't want anyone to nab your ideas and take them to the BBC. But yeah, it's really, really great. And yeah, I mean, what I would say is that in TV, you just have to be prepared to graft. You have to be prepared to work the long hours. So in that How It Started picture, that is me after a 20-hour filming day on one studio day. I mean, I could have looked a bit worse than I could have, but that's the kind of thing you should expect from it. But it will be fun and it'll be worthwhile. Like, you always have to be friendly, approachable, sociable, unless you want to become an editor, because they literally sit by themselves for 10 hours a day. So that's a great way to go if you don't want to do that. But like I said before, I can guarantee that you'll never have 2 days the same. And it is a very rewarding industry. Like, there's a very clear career path. You get your checkpoints. It's great when you step up. You get a great feeling. It's one of those kind of jobs. But yeah, my words of advice would basically be just to say yes to everything, try as much as possible, make your CV varied. And it is a very competitive industry, but once you get your foot in the door, it will always be in, it will take care of you. Yeah, it's a great place to work, definitely.
It's brilliant. Thank you so much, Emily. It's really great to get that insight into TV and your journey. We've had a few questions come in, which I'm going
Oh,
to ask away at you.
great.
Now, this question did make me laugh slightly because did lots of your colleagues from university manage to work in the industry as you do now? And I say funny because me and Emily graduated from the same class. For those eagle live viewers, you'd see me in that graduation photo.
Yes, that is true.
But I'll let you go ahead and answer, Emily.
A lot of my colleagues. So I do have one friend who has set up his own animation business, which is amazing, and he works for himself, and it is literally like all praise him. Um, so he's gone through a different way that I have. I obviously went straight into TV and kind of went through the more traditional route, whereas he did a couple of other things first and would be kind of doing it alongside other jobs until he had enough behind him to do that for real, which was great. I have a friend who basically they didn't go into TV, but they did go into producing. So he went on to be a producer at a design company who make like big installations for places like the O2, like O2 backstage, all of those kind of areas that you would see, or like those really big funky things that are quite Instagrammable inside, big buildings and organizations. That's the kind of stuff that they would make. So that was a different side of producing, and he was a big organizer. That's all kind of make it, producing for builds is more like getting in touch with the people that actually, the artists and the designers, to make the project. So he went down that kind of route. And I'm trying to think. A lot of people use kind of like transferable skills, I think. And I have a friend who went to work for there's an agency called Coolbox, I think it is, and they basically help runners go and work on different like adverts and TV stuff and film stuff. And they're like an agency, so they're a great place to be a part of, because they will find work for you and help you to progress and stuff, which sounds really great. So a lot of people on my course went down different routes and kind of no one went down the same path, which was quite funny. And we all had our like different styles of going about it. So yeah, it depends where your confidence is and what you just yeah, you just kind of roll with it after uni, I think.
Great, thank you. Another question that we've had is, how did you get the interviews? So the interviews for the different gigs that you've got, was that simply through networking, or did you apply another way?
Okay, so my first ever job was, and quite a few of my jobs actually are on Facebook. If anyone has kind of looked into that yet, there's a Facebook group called my first. It's like jobs in TV runners. It's like the one of the biggest runners Facebook groups ever, and basically loads of jobs. ITV use it, the BBC use it, all of these companies use it because it just reaches so many people and so many diverse people as well. So because everyone has Facebook at the end of the day. Um, so that's how I got a lot of my interviews, was basically just joining all of these groups, and just applying like to everything. But then a lot of it, so after, a lot of my jobs are who I know. So when the ball started rolling and I was a freelancer, it would be that I'd work on one show and then someone from that show that I was working on was going on to another show and would say, "Oh, do you want to come with me? We're looking for a researcher, and you're great." So you just kind of went with them, that kind of thing. But a lot of that, it's still, whilst networking and people asking you to do gigs and people calling you up out of the blue, it is mainly Facebook, I must admit. And like places like ITV, for example, once you work for them, they regularly check up on your availability. So always send in an updated CV to a talent manager because they'll always look after you and you always get things coming your way, basically. So it's just keeping everyone updated with what you're doing, I would say.
Right. We might have to speed up the answers a little bit because we've got about 5 minutes and the
Oh
questions are
my
flooding
God.
in now.
Sorry, go.
Um,
I'll be
so,
quicker.
have you got any advice for networking, please?
Oh, networking. Okay. Say yes to going for a drink after work. That's a good stage for networking. Um, it's just I think you just get more confident the more people you meet. I suppose the first job you'll do, you'll meet so many people, and it is just like I said about being sociable and stuff. And like I said before, join the Facebook groups because there'll be so many people in that group that you can just like chat to and that kind of thing. So that's a good way of networking as well. Yeah.
Would you say that going into TV is a generally financially stable career, considering you don't know when or where the next job will be?
I've been very lucky. It's I do have a lot of friends. Basically, I lived at home for a while. Because I live in Hertfordshire. I lived about an hour away from commuting into London, so I stayed at home, and commuted in rather than moving out and stuff. So I was lucky in that sense that I didn't have to pay for rent for a while, although I was paying for travel and it's quite expensive. Um, but yeah, you just have to get very good at saving. And I know a lot of people who do day running, for example, will have a second job, will be doing kind of waitressing or, something to keep them afloat, that kind of thing. But I think once you get through that kind of once you're past a runner and you're up to researcher, your jobs will be much better paid and they will be longer and you can save better and you can afford to have those little weeks off in between, and you can afford to move out, you can afford to do those things. So I'd stay at home for as long as possible when I'm a runner and just try and save, but it will take care of you the higher you get up, definitely.
Fantastic. While you were at university, did you work with film effects and make background props for films at all?
I didn't, or did I? No, not. It was funny. I didn't really do that at uni because I filmed a lot of my stuff kind of outside. Because at the time we were doing it, we didn't have as much equipment, I think. But I think now they've got like a studio and the whole shebang. Um, I did, however, start making props and working with art departments as soon as I got into TV because, especially on like game shows, there's a whole art department that makes those giant props and everything. And normally you're working a lot with them to go and find the things they want. You know, they say like, I need 100 red cups by this time so that I can make this giant robot looking thing. So then you'll go and source the right things, and you know, you'll help them to assemble it, because you end up being a bit of an art assistant at the time. So it's actually a really good industry to get into, kind of art department stuff as well, because as a runner you generally are assisting the art department a lot and making that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, I enjoyed that because I come from a bit of an arty background, as I said. But yeah, it does come up.
Great. And it seems like a last question. Would you say going into TV has generally been an overall successful career for you?
Um, at the moment, I can say yes. um, I will tell you in 20 years if it's still a success. But at the moment, yes, overall, I've continued to work. I've worked in TV for nearly 5 years now, and I've always had sorry, an income. I've always been looked after by it. I've always worked on like fun shows. Um, and yeah, so I feel like it has been successful because I'm now an assistant producer and I started as a runner. So I've had a very clear career progression, and yeah, I think I would count myself as as a success story, if that doesn't sound too big-headed.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So before we wrap up today, just want to remind you that we still have more Ignite series talks. And especially for those media-minded people out there, we have a talk with about animation with Dan Kelby, character designer, who's worked with Netflix, Cartoon Network, and all sorts of different clients. But outside of that, there's more talks covering a whole range of different subjects, giving you an insight into different creative areas and many different jobs that you probably wouldn't have thought have existed. If you haven't already, you can book your place and request past sessions as well onto the website. We'll send a link into the chat, which Annabelle will do just now. But essentially, it's www.anyway.ac.uk/events. You know what? We'll pop it into the chat. Never mind me rambling on there. But also to get an idea of the range of creative careers out there, you might want to look at another link that we're going to pop into the chats for our Your Creative Future booklet. It's a really good source where you can look at different subjects, and it'll break down lots of different job roles that might be of interest to you there. And also, there might be teachers in here or any students. You can pass these links over to teachers for free activities around portfolio advice sessions, looking at different creative career paths and Q&As with current students, with another link for information with schools. And we're also doing our Beyond the Frame competition, which is still open. And this year's theme is looking at community. So if you want more details on that and details on how to enter that competition, we have another link for Anyways Beyond the Frame competition. And lastly, if you'll please spend a few moments to fill out some feedback forms, it will really help us in the future to deliver even better sessions for you. But also for anybody who does fill in the feedback form, they will be automatically in for a chance to win an Anyway branded chili bottle, which I'm sure some of you who have been to our sessions before have seen what it's like, and it's beautiful and it's great. So make sure to fill out those forms for us. It'll be really great. And if you have any questions around the Ignite series, or if there's anything else that you'd like to see from us at Anyway and Aniko, or even if you have any more questions for Emily and around this session, please email us at studentrecruitment@anyway.ac.uk. That's about everything from us today. I'll just wait to see if there's anything else. And we've got some thank you messages, and we've got people saying that they're going to spot your name in Mock of the Week.
Ah, that's so nice.
So yeah, it's been great seeing you, Emily, and thank you for joining along.
Thank you for listening, everyone. I'd say it would be nice to see you, but I haven't seen any of you. But I'm sure you're all very lovely, beautiful people. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll just give it a second for Annabelle to drop the rest of the links. I know I've bombarded you with lots of links there. So you could even use this as a chance to drop any final questions before we finish off the session today.
Anyone furiously typing?
That's all the links there. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all soon in future Ignite sessions.
Thanks.
Thank you.